Well, we're told that a number of reasons have resulted in the predictable rainfall pattern we used to have now becoming as unpredictable as it can be. But this also has repercussions to city planning, but also the subject of its effects on the city or many towns and communities, as we're reporting this morning from the eastern region, where a number of communities, including the main regional capital, Koforidua, have also been affected. But what is the effect of this very phenomenon? But what are also the causative factors for the current state of the unpredictable rainfall patterns we're seeing? James Dusu is a meteorologist with the Ghana Meteorological Agency. And he's a acting deputy officer in charge of forecast with the agency, and would want to speak to him. He is in the studio. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Normal, the current rainfall patterns. I think that it's been very much unpredictable over the last couple of years.
Yeah, you would understand that we are in a situation where you've been hearing about these global changes, climate change, and these are responsible for these changing weather patterns. That is the result that we are having nowadays.
Back in the 70s, we used to hear about, read literature for my part, about the predictability of the effect of the climate and its changes on people's livelihoods. But it got to a certain crescendo in the 90s with a lot more international forum or fora on the subject. But did we have control over them as humans or society?
Yes, partly or mostly because of industrializations, we have these carbon components being pumped into the atmosphere, and these result to warming of the atmosphere. And globally, you would realize that average temperatures over the Earth's surface are rising, and this gives rises to changing weather patterns as a result of heating in the atmosphere, which will cause more rains than average over certain areas and less rains than average over certain areas. You would have rains that are above normal, or more rains over certain areas and very scanty rains or no rains over certain areas, which leads to famine. So these are results of man's activities. And you would realize that mostly these days we have surface areas that are tarred, surface areas that are cemented, tiled, and what have you. These cause runoff that in cases of heavy rains that could be channeled into the very narrow drainage that we have. You see, we don't look at these things as to what the consequences are going to be. When you have more rains coming in a day than normal, you are going to have more water being channeled into the gutters or the drainage that are of standard dimensions. You see, these have not been widened. You see, they have been constructed with volumes of water that have been calculated from the past. You see, so with these modern ones, with the tiling and everything, more rains coming in a day, we would have these factors causing flooding over areas which we have not looked at very cautiously.
Well, as a developing country, we will look up to the West because we don't want dust. But you can't blame us for it, can you?
No, so when we are going...
Or is it that we're not predictable enough?
There is one thing about the tiling without the climate change, and there's the other aspect of the climate change also coming in. So you are having a pull-push effect of these two. You get it? So instead of addressing this one on its own and addressing this one on its own, we are not even addressing any. So the effect is like a double.
Koforidua and its environment, you can't tell me it's about tiling.
Not about tiling in any case, but you realize that the climate change aspect of it is what is affecting there now.
Is that why we hear about flooding in big cities like Paris, in London, etc., for which we didn't see?
Yes, because when the rains are coming, they are not going to tell you the amount or the volumes that are coming. You get it? And you will not even know whether those drainage channels can meet the discharge of the volumes of water that are pouring down. You get it? So it is a whole lot. You cannot predict things these days that easily as it were before.
Well, Mr. Dusu, we get your point. But are you saying that because of the literature and the studies and the research that has been undertaken and the observations that you, the experts, have been making, there's every indication that a lot more volumes of water are falling from the atmosphere than it used to be?
Yes, because of the climate change, you would have volumes of water coming in a short duration of time than it used to be. You get it? And these are the patterns or the phenomena that we observe that we adduce to climate change. We have seen these things, so we say these things are not normal, meaning that the climate is said to be changing. I hope you understand that.
I do understand you.
Yes. So observing these things over a period of time and comparing these phenomena to what we have been observing in times past, we see that the phenomena or the occurrences of these phenomena are shifting away from the normal. You get it? So we also need to adjust ourselves to be able to counter these effects.
I see. Has this effect got anything to do or has any link to the way agriculture is undertaken or could be undertaken?
Yes, definitely, because in every activity that we do, we are always in the atmosphere, and it is in the atmosphere that weather occurs, such that each crop is affected by the elements of the atmosphere. You get it? So in order to maximize the output, we need to do these. We need to cultivate the crops vis-a-vis the weather patterns or the weather conditions that are peculiar to certain areas. You get it? You need to study those weather patterns peculiar to certain areas before you are able to decide on which crops you are going to cultivate over that area.
I see. Well, a very interesting point you make, Mr. James Dusu. But that is why we've also been able to get in touch with Charles Yaba. He is the president for the Peasant Farmers Association. A very good morning to you. You are the programs officer. I have to get your position right. Charles Yaba. A very good morning to you. Are you on the line, please?
Yes, please.
Okay. I know that you have been having this very conversation with us, and some few months ago, you also elaborated on this adequately in that very forum that you put together. But the unpredictable nature of the rainy seasons or the rain patterns, has it got any link to the way your farmers undertake their work?
Thank you so much. Let me say good morning to your listeners. Climate change has a serious impact on agricultural production across sub-Saharan Africa. Now, if you take Ghana, for instance, in 2014, you realize that most part of northern Ghana, you take from Upper West, Upper East, and Northern region, have limited rainfall, which actually affected the timing of the planting. The rains came when farmers were ready to plant in May, June, and the rains came in later part of July in 2014 and 2015. So actually they planted late, and by October, the rain stopped. So all crops that have a lifespan of 3 to 4 months couldn't actually yield well. Now, if you look at this year, you realize that when the season started, the rains actually started early in northern part of the country, that is Upper East, Upper West, and Northern region. But in the middle belt, Techiman, Kintampo, Nkranza, and Edra area, they never experienced rain for the major season. We only started experiencing good rains in Kintampo and Techiman area in later part of August and this September. So those who are planning to plant cast crops like cashew and other things couldn't do it. And those who are also doing major season farming of maize couldn't also do it. You know, if you take the middle belt, they have 2 seasons, the major and the minor season. The major season normally starts around April, May, and the minor season will start in October. Now, you go to the northern sector, the rains this year came early, which we never predicted. It continued raining from July up to now. Ghana is ready for harvesting. We are finding difficulty in harvesting them. The maize came to, the rain came to an extent that maize around that area couldn't also do well. And in that of Brown Hartford, that's the Middle Belt area, they couldn't also farm during the major season. So all these factors put in together, you realize that it has serious impact, whether the rains came in lower quantity or in a higher quantity. And it has actually affected the yields in recent times. Now, what we need to do in going forward is for us to begin thinking of how we can adapt climate-resilient farming practices. This, we are looking at plants that can withstand weather when we have limited rain, and then plants that will be able to stand the heavy rainfall. That is what we've not been able to do, and our policymakers too have not turned their attention to that. We are thinking that in going forward, the best way we will be able to minimize this impact is for us to be able to create a system where we are able to conserve water, so that when the rain comes in larger quantities, just like we are experiencing in northern part of the country, we are able to preserve that water, so that in the event that we don't have enough rainfall, we are able to rely on that to actually do our farming activity. But we've not been able to do that for several years.
Okay.
And we are just hoping that in going forward, our policymakers and all those concerned will turn their focus in doing that.
I believe you're talking about one district, one dam.
Yeah, I think my opinion was thought in that. As a farmer, we always support any intervention that would bring about, making water available to farming. Water is very important if you want. If you can do all the things. If you don't have enough available water to support your farming practices, it becomes very difficult.
Okay.
One district, one dam is a laudable thing, but we will try to actually state it in a context. Dams are created on waterway, so that is the difficulty we have. We would rather be looking at...
Well, you were saying that you supported it, but you hold on. So we'll talk on this very subject. But you hold on, because I also have in the studio a meteorologist from the Ghana Meteorological Agency. He's an expert on predicting the weather, etc. And so what he's saying is that we need to make sure we give the best advice to the farmers, like their association. Do you do that as experts?
We are yet to come up with a more reliable agro-meteorological unit that is supposed to interact with the farmers continually.
Okay.
So that needs to be set up.
So otherwise, you could have been providing a lot more data.
Yes.
Okay.
We need to be working closely hand in hand, the farmers and the Met Agency. We need to be working more hand in hand as to how we plan our agriculture. And we don't seem to be having this interaction very well. Okay.
He's talking about climate change adapted practices. He was using a certain phrase like that.
Climate resilient crops. Yes, that is to find out, identify which, or come out with crops that are able to withstand maybe scanty rainfall or over rainfall, to be able to know which one to plant and get a good output.
Mr. Nyaba?
Yes, sir.
Does it mean that perhaps the groundnut and things that we used to grow in some of the areas in the arable savanna-like regions of northern Ghana would now have to change the type of cropping that is planted?
That is the problem. That is the problem. You know, if you look at in the past, there were certain crops that used to grow in the certain parts of the country. And those crops were selected in those areas due to the climate within those areas. For instance, when you take millet, late millet, that people in the upper east and upper west used to grow, those crops doesn't need enough rainfall to yield. And those crops were very nutritious. If you take sweet potatoes that they used to grow in those areas, they need just some few rainfall and it will yield well. But our focus or our policy attention has moved away from all those crops. And if you go to the area, you see that all farmers are now into maize and rice production, which is not good for that area. So what we keep saying is that, look, the policy attention should not just focus on food crops that are produced by advanced countries. We have our own crops, which are climate resilient, so we can support those areas. So that if you take areas like the Ima, which is very good in maize production, they can concentrate in producing maize, and these people will buy from there, and they will also concentrate in producing crops like groundnut, millet, and sweet potato, which can also be exported to the southern sector. When we do that, we will be able to address some of the problems within our means. Now, to just speak to your panelists there, I think I'm very happy that he's in the stadium. We launched a project recently in Techiman called Agroecological Farming and Sustainable Farming Practices, where we invited Meteorological Services Department to be part of that program. In going forward, what we are thinking is to work closely with them to see how they'll be able to travel with us to most of the farming community to identify the problem, so that before the farming season even starts, they are able to tell us that this year the rains will start in this month. We are expecting this number of rains within the season. With that, we are also able to adjust ourselves and adopt a particular crop that will be able to withstand that.
But you were talking about this very year and the farming season or the crop season in northern Ghana, and how it's become a bit of an uncertain nature. Predictably, how has it had a toll on the farmers themselves?
This year, in fact, it's very difficult to tell. The season started well, that one I must admit. Those who planted maize on time, their maize were able to tassel before the rain started heavily, so the impact is less. But there were others, because of last or previous year's experience, when the rains were coming, they were still waiting. They were not sure whether to start planting or not. So when they started planting, it wasn't quite long when the heavy rain started pouring. So those people might not be able to harvest more. But when you go to the middle belt, where we used to have a lot of maize coming from, that is Techiman, Kintampo, Nkwanza, Esdra, and then the Wenchi area there. In fact, the situation there was not too good for us because the rains didn't start on time. You go to the coastal belt, that's Volta region along the coast there, the situation is quite better. So for now, I'm here to take information from across all these areas to be able to establish whether we are likely to have a good harvest this year or not. But my concern still goes to everybody, and especially the politicians, that they should all focus their attention on making water available to farmers. It's very important, because that is the only way we'll be able to survive. This climate change is not stopping today or tomorrow. Okay. And other countries like Burkina and other drier desert land, countries have adopted this means, and it's helping them. So we want the politicians to focus their attention on making water available to farmers, and that will help address the part of the problem.
And if you say desert-like countries, you mean savanna-like countries?
Yeah, savanna-like countries like Burkina, Mali, and other places. Yeah, that's where the world is moving, because you can't rely on the natural rainfall to address your problem. So what you need to do is, we are fortunate there are seasons where we have enough rain than we needed. So we don't allow that water to go wasted. We have to find a way of tracking it, and then we use it in periods where we don't have enough rainfall. And not only even in Africa, you go to India and other places. That's all everybody is doing. So it is the only way we can move forward.
Well, thank you very much, Charles Nyaba. Is that why you support the one village, one dam concept?
I support the one village, one dam, but I'm always being careful. I don't want to drag into political talk. But when they advise us, I think we will also recommend on how to go about it. We are ready to partner with them to create more water for farmers within the rural community. We need water. That one is important.
All right. Okay, let me absolve you of any political non-mileage that you may not score here. So that will be it. Charles Nyaba is the program officer for the Peasant Farmers Association, speaking to us about the impact of the current rainfall patterns, which have become indiscriminate or perhaps a more unreliable pattern, or also unpredictable way of rains as we're recording currently. And we're still having in the studio James Dusu. He's a meteorologist with the Ghana Meteorological Agency. And predictably, what he said makes a lot more sense. Is that the observation you have also made?
Yes, it makes a lot of sense, because as you said, in time past, the rains were of certain pattern, and now they are changing. So we cannot continue to rely on the way our food production was handled in the time past in this present times. We need to adapt changes to the approach as to if there's going to be less rains, then we need to conserve water as he's talking about, so that in case there is less water, we can pump in the water from the dams. You get it? We don't construct our areas taking into account the rains. We don't have storm tanks that store rainwater. Most of the places in the country, I don't know where we have these.
So we have
storages.
no water collection points.
Yes, we don't have water collection points. The school I went to during those days, the whole administration block is sitting on a tank, so that when rain gathers, it goes inside. The whole long block of the classrooms is sitting on a tank. You get it? So the water just drips into it.
So when you don't have water, you have supply.
Yes. We need to adapt these things in these times, such that when there is less water, we can just fall on those ones, or we can just keep using that one and stop relying on the or we use the pipe-borne water for drinking and other things, while we can use this source of water for those other things.
So you're saying we just have to be more innovative about that?
Yes, because climate is changing. We have to be aware, and we have to take steps. We have to make efforts to working things to get output. We don't rely on nature as we used to do in the past to determine how things go for us. Those times are gone. If you want to go with those situations in the time past, then things are going to draw us back. We will be facing difficulties, and we will not know how these difficulties are arising from.
So are you worried about the impact that the very unpredictable rains tend to have on communities? For example, a community like Koforidua and its environs used not to experience that.
Yes, they are worrying, because these can just bring about diseases, outbreaks of certain diseases, because you don't know how they keep their sewages and that kind of thing. And if there is flooding and it just goes to cause this thing to mix with it, then the whole place is now contaminated. And how do you deal with that? One problem has caused another problem. You get it? So if we can address how to arrest water, especially in areas where we are tiring, we are cementing, we are tiling, to be able to save some of this water, it would go a long way to reducing the runoffs, which causes the flooding. You get it? And in the same sense, doing little with the water we produce from the Ghana Water Company as to high cost of production and all these things. You see, so we can multiply the efforts to reduce the burden on lives we have.
The impact, or perhaps also the changes we need to adopt as far as the planning of our towns, communities, and big cities are. How do the knowledge you have tend to dovetail into the planning of communities?
You would understand that topography has much to do with runoffs, and if you are going to understand the changing weather patterns, and you are going to understand the little resources that we have these days, we cannot be constructing residential areas that are just flat bungalows. We need to go more into high-rise buildings. We need to go into storage of water facilities for these high-rise buildings. That would go a long way to reducing the effect of tarring, cementing large areas. You get it?
Because currently that's what we're doing.
Yes, currently that's what we are doing. We do not grass our compounds that
anymore.
Much. Yeah.
So water doesn't see.
Yes.
See.
Yes.
Okay.
Doesn't.
Okay. From the literature that is available to you, or perhaps the research that in your industry you tend to undertake, is it expected to be a lot more predictable in the years coming?
That has to do with if we are able to have the right equipment to be able to determine how these things are.
No, I'm talking about generally around the world. Is climate expected to be going that bad and a lot more unpredictability in the weather pattern?
They will be more unpredictable.
Okay.
They'll be more unpredictable as the years run if we do not find different or alternate means of pumping carbon into the atmosphere. This seeks to cause warming, and if we are not able to curtail that, it is going to cause more harm, because more industries are going to be built as humans' population increases, and the resources are the same. The land surface is the same. All of these are going to reduce the forests and create more communities.
Well, very interesting. But have you noticed that even when it rains, still the weather is a bit warm after the rain?
Yes, because
because yesterday had rain, I was feeling warm and I had my power off. So I was wondering.
Yes, because the heat is not allowed to escape because of the carbon in the atmosphere. It traps it. So even when the rains come, there is still the heat is in the lower atmosphere. So it just bounces back.
You, these science people, tend to confuse us all the time. But thank you very much. James Dusu is a meteorologist with the Ghana Meteorological Agency. Again, speaking to us about the unpredictable nature of rains, which has been linked greatly to the changing weather patterns caused by poor climate change that we're also experiencing as a globe. But interspersed was also a conversation with Charles Nyaba, who is a program officer for the Peasant Farmers Association. Next week.